One person died on Monday as anti-government protests in Kenya turned violent. The deceased, a young man, is reported to have died of gunshot wounds. This is the second death since Kenya's opposition leader called for protests against President William Ruto for stealing the elections and failing to control the rising cost of living. Like last week's protest, the police fired tear gas at the convoy of opposition leader Raila Odinga and his supporters while looters went on the rampage. Odinga has promised demonstrations twice a week on Monday and Thursday. But the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Koome, warns that the protests in Nairobi and Kisumu were illegal. Now, a section of the crowd looted the farms of former President Uhuru Kenyatta and made away with livestock like sheep and cut down trees on the farms as well. Another group attacked the offices of a gas company belonging to Odinga while journalists were caught in the crosshairs. Meanwhile, Kenyan officials are working on making it more difficult for protesters to gather again. In the meantime, Kenyans are left on tenterhooks for what is to come and when the second demonstration hits on Thursday. I am Kenyan Amano. Thanks for joining our gathering. Joining us on the square today is Maliba Arnold. He's public policy analyst, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. A little later in the conversation, we expect to hear from an honorable member of Kenya's parliament on the side of the opposition, Babu Owino. When he comes in, I'll let you know. But right now, you're welcome to the square, Maliba.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off with what Nairobi looks like today, post the demonstrations on Monday. What would you say?
Nairobi is actually calm. It's business as usual. You might not even realize that we had almost deadly demonstrations yesterday. It looks like we are adapting to this new system where we have got Monday as a holiday, an extension of the weekend. And now we've not seen a Thursday that takes us to the streets. We will actually see that probably in the next 48 hours. But over and above, Nairobi is calm, business as usual. Nothing much other than what you see in the news.
I see. Let's talk about the protests that took place yesterday. How have you processed the events that took place?
Well, yesterday I think both sides did escalate because the opposition has always wanted to get into the CBD, the Central Business District of Nairobi. But the government has actually been keen that protesters should not be allowed to gather in the CBD. Of course, we've seen the police, specifically the Inspector General, going out and saying that the demonstrations were illegal. In and of itself, of course, it's an illegal declaration because our constitution guarantees the right to picket, to demonstrate, to assemble. So all you need to do is actually just to liaise with the authorities for purposes of logistics and probably security. But you cannot outlaw a demonstration so long as if it's actually done within the confines and the ambit of the law. So yesterday, of course, we saw there had been threats from government supporters that they would also organize. And what we saw yesterday was that the government was not so much keen on stopping the people from demonstrating and moving around, but it was so keen on ensuring that it sends what I call a little fear of God to the leadership of the opposition. So we saw a small group of not more than 10 people sent to a gas cylinder manufacturing facility that is owned by Raila Odinga, who is the Azimio, the official opposition leader. And then we saw another group of people also attack a farm owned by the former president, who's being accused by the government for funding the demonstrations because the former president's preferred candidate was Raila Odinga, and they lost in the last election.
I see. So what I want to find out now is, while the government has not told us or commented on whether or not it sent those people to commit the crimes that they did on the Odinga-linked gas company and the Kenyatta family farm, we know that some comments have been passed in the past. Was that a wise decision? Would you consider it a wise decision for people on the side of the government to have gone out and done what they did?
Generally, it's common knowledge, or rather some assumed knowledge, that there are three people in this country who cannot be arrested or touched by government. That is the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. He's the son of the founding president of our country. And then Raila Odinga, given to the huge support that he has across the country, it is generally assumed, even if it's political banter, that you cannot arrest Raila Odinga. And then the current president, because he also has got quite a massive backing. So what has been happening in the past is that Raila Odinga specifically will organize demonstrations, but the government doesn't know what to do with him, because even if you were to arrest him, the joke has always been, where do you keep him? And generally, guys will talk about arresting Raila Odinga is not a problem, but where to keep him after you've arrested him, even if he were to make a mistake. And if you will have a republic after arresting him, are the questions that each and everyone who thinks of that particular option has to answer. So, but then from my experience, especially in working with government and working for government in the past, I have realized one thing, that ordinarily you cannot run government with the known arms of government. Specifically, in our instance, we have got what I love to call 4 arms of government, unofficially, but officially 3 arms of government. That's the legislature, the executive, and then the judiciary. In our case, we have got independent offices, but we were just shy of calling it an arm of government. So, but then literally every time you get to government, you have to find an alternative arm. It's an official one. Normally, a lot of times you call it the Directorate of Political Affairs. In other jurisdictions, people would call it the deep state. That shadow unit that you use to run government, at least bureaucracy is a little bit heavy. So the people who did both the attack on Raila Odinga's gas facility and those who went to President Kenyatta's farm, ordinarily you might not directly link them to government, because whereas you would actually know that there has been messages passed to that effect, there is the plausible deniability on the government side, because you will not link these individuals. But
why not? Why not, Maliba? Because then we have on record a majority member of parliament who had incited people to attack the Kenyatta family property because they felt that without proof, as you have said, accused the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, of sponsoring the protest, and they were going to take their own pound of flesh. And so it's easy to link the two, that if people have indeed gone there to do that, then we should hold the member of parliament accountable.
Strategically, I would understand the wisdom by those who are threatening to also reach out and attack the people they claim are supporting the protesters. That is true. In my words, I think the attacks were symbolic, largely to send the message that the invincibility by President, the assumed invincibility against the law of President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga can actually be done away with. And the veil, or what you call the cloak of untouchability, that the two are not touchable, was being lifted, to lift that particular veil so that they know that essentially the people in power are not really people who cannot do anything about this. But going back to the question, the way you framed it, it's a little bit difficult, because you and you are in media, and you know that opinion is free and facts are sacred. So whatever way you look at it, we could look at it and everybody assume that people who attacked these things were, of course, government sponsored. But politics is a little bit difficult. I'm not saying this is the fact, but I'm just trying to raise this possibility. Don't you think that it's also possible for people to actually raise what we call white flags or false flag operations, where I can actually attack myself and, of course, claim that so-and-so did that? So the government has not denied. When these reports first came out, and the opposition leader said that the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, was planning to probably come up with these particular attacks, the deputy president did the NCND. It's a very popular response by CIA. I can neither confirm nor deny that I am planning that. So the NCND reply by the deputy president, of course, left things tanks waggy. So from where I sit, it's you can't confirm that indeed it's government, and you also cannot deny, because we've also seen a member of parliament, not one, actually several, saying that them that actually are planning this particular, we do not know if they have got evidence to that particular effect. But then when he says that them that are actually facilitating the demonstrations will also feel the pinch. So
okay. So which brings me to my question. How seriously do you think the government is taking the protesters' demands and the impact on the protests on the ordinary Kenyan in the country right now? It would appear the government's a bit laissez-faire about this, wouldn't you say?
The government takes the protesters seriously. The problem is the list of demands, because we then have got two demands. Initially, we looked at it as a messaging problem from the opposition, because clearly, if you were to just focus on the cost of living, that is a legit issue, and Kenyans are not really happy. Even though I will tell you that last year in August, stretching from June through to August, when we had elections, the cost of items, the foodstuffs, were much higher than they are today. But still, they are considerably high, seeing that revenues and where people get their daily bread haven't really been sorted. But the fact is that once you bring in the issue of elections, then every regime goes into regime survival mode. So you are not going to stop the president, first of all, from self-preservation, let me call it regime survival, before then they look at these other issues. The opposition led by Mr. Odinga will actually win this battle very, very easily. And government will even be willing to actually open up a table to talk with, or rather to talk and see what they can do about these issues. But once you bring in...
Well, I think we lost Maliba there, but Maliba Arnold is a public policy analyst. We have been discussing events in Kenya the past few weeks, particularly the protests that took place yesterday. You recall that the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, in Kenya has called for mass protests twice a week in the country on Mondays and Thursdays. And so one took place yesterday, and that's why Maliba is here with us. Maliba, continue with the point you're making.
So I was saying, once you bring in the issue of the legitimacy of the current regime, so how do they sit down on the table with you? As in the opposition leader has said he does not recognize the president, the current president, as the leader of the country. Yet he says this government is illegitimate. Yet he wants the government to do something about the cost of living. But over and above, he's saying that they vacate office and they get out of the way. So clearly, you know that there is a mix-up of messaging here. There is a messaging problem here. Because if we were to focus on one thing, and that is the cost of living, it will be very easy for government even to respond, because that is not an issue you can run away with.
I see.
But once you bring in the issues to do with the elections, it becomes a very difficult issue or a plate for government to actually handle.
We'll have Honorable Babu Owino respond to that when he's ready for our conversation. But I want us to look at some of the measures that the police has decided, or authorities generally have decided to take in order to, nip protests like this in the bud. What do you think about some of the proposals that they are hoping to make to the law around public gatherings?
I think somehow power really gets into heads, because my friends in government at the moment, you listen to them talk and you really want to ask serious questions, because, the Constitution is superior. Article 37 of the Constitution of Kenya grants the right to picket, to demonstrate, so long as you are unarmed and you are unarmed and you're doing it peaceably. Of course, it's been difficult to necessarily guarantee that a demonstration will be peaceful. There are a lot of dynamics, sometimes beyond even the people who are organizing, that determine if a demonstration is peaceful or not. So the proposals, of course, that we have seen from the Ministry of Interior on trying to reduce the veracity of demonstrations, by and large, will actually collapse at the High Court. It wouldn't go so far. So there's not so much that will actually be seen outside of those the proposals that have been made, because they then nullify the whole essence of Article 37 of the Constitution.
Very
and
well.
Since the Constitution is the superior law here, if you're going to look at the authorities of law, you first of all are looking at the Constitution, you get to the Public Order Act, and then the guidelines they are proposing. Those I do not think will actually stand the test of court eventually. And our courts have actually been very progressive.
What has continued to happen is the police reaction to protesters and how they respond to, these protests. And I want us to look closely at the police's action yesterday as well when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back to The Square. Today, our focus is on protests that have been going on in Kenya, called by the opposition leader, Raila Odinga. If you've just joined us, with me, Maliba Arnold. He's a public policy analyst. But also joining us now is the Honorable Member of Parliament for Embakasi East, Paul Babu Owino. Thank you so much for your time here, gentlemen, and you're welcome to the program, Honorable. I want to start with you this time, Babu. You called for the protest, and by you, I mean your side of governance in the country. So I want to hear from you. Were the events of yesterday what you expected? How do you think it went?
First, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm really happy to see Comrade Arnold Maliba. That's a great brain in our nation, and we celebrate him as a youthful leader in this nation. And I'm really, really happy to see him and at least to exchange ideas with him. Number one, concerning yesterday's demonstration, we must, first of all, go to the foundation of this issue. And the question is, why are we demonstrating? So our demonstration is, number one, is catalyzed by a number of factors. One, there's the issue of high cost of living in our country. Two, there's the issue of the electoral injustice, or rather electoral justice. You can talk about it that way, to be positive. And there are also a number of issues that we gave demands on. And when the time elapsed, the time that we gave a ultimatum, because we gave the sitting government a period of around 14 days, and we further extended it, which was fair enough. Then after that, having not executed any of our ultimatums, we decided to picket and to hold peaceful demonstrations, which is entrenched in our constitution, which is the supreme law of the land in Kenya. And our demonstrations have been peaceful so far. We started by doing national rallies in different counties in our country. The rallies were very peaceful. There was no any incident reported. There was no any violent rally hold across the nation. And then we started demonstrating, which is our right. Then, as you know, the police in our country, they started being very violent with the protesters. They didn't want us to access the CBD, which is Nairobi CBD. So we decided to, we were pulling people towards the town, towards CBD, because we were going to hold our demonstration at KICC. But unfortunately, they became very, very violent. Some people lost lives.
Right. So here's the question: Who caused the violence? You said you were on a peaceful protest. You got to a point and it became violent.
I started from a background. That we've been holding peaceful rallies. Then after that, we gave ultimatums to the government, which none was met. Then we decided to hold peaceful demonstrations. So there's a background that we were holding peaceful rallies across the country. Then we were holding peaceful demonstrations. Then police, in their wisdom or lack of the same, they decided to now unleash terror on the Kenyan citizens. Because we are unarmed. Actually, the only The only thing we were armed with are our brains. We had no weapons, but the police are armed. They have guns. They have other weapons that they are using during the demonstrations. So our question is, why should the police be harsh on the Kenyan citizens who are peacefully demonstrating? So demonstrations started by police. The violence actually started when the police decided to met violence on the Kenyan citizens.
I see.
So it is not about
there are those who have suggested that protesters also pelted stones at the police. What do you have to say to that?
That was reactionary. Why? Because the police were firing tear gas at the protesters, and they were also meeting violence. They met violence on the protesters. As a result, it was a reactionary. So citizens decided just to throw stones to protect themselves. Why? Because of the action that the police was meeting on them.
Very well. Perhaps I should try and understand what kind of violence you say that the police meted upon protesters. What was the nature of violence that the police brought on you yesterday?
I think that was extra force that the police was using, because actually police is also allowed to use some minimal force within some reasonable minimal force. But that was extra because we've seen loss of lives. We've seen people being admitted in hospital. So if you ask me, I can say that it was extra judicial. It is not within the allowed parameters. The force that was applied on the Kenyan citizens was too much. So the force that they applied on citizens, for citizens to have been safe, because they were shooting at the citizens, they were firing tear gas at the citizens, people were getting hurt, and we were thousands and thousands. There was a possibility of a stampede occurring, and that was really risking the lives of the Kenyan citizens. So to us, the police used extra force, because if lives are lost, then that is a different thing altogether.
Very well. The police has considered, I know you've mentioned the issue of constitutional rights to demonstrate, but the police, on the other hand, considers the demonstrations in Nairobi and Kisumu illegal. Going forward, you have another one planned for Thursday if what your leader has been calling for is right. Going forward, how do we ensure that the police and the protesters are on the same page, so the protesters can go about their constitutional right without any mayhem like what we've seen in the past?
The police said it is unlawful to demonstrate, but the Constitution is supreme. Whoever goes against the natural laws of justice becomes repugnant and inconsistent to the supreme law, to the apex of the law, which is the Constitution. So it is not the work of the police to declare the demonstrations illegal or unlawful. But the Constitution allows us. We don't even have to ask for permission from the police, but just to notify them. Notification, which we did within reasonable timelines. So be that as it may, the police will still say that the demonstrations are illegal. But the other day they went to court. The government went to court seeking for orders to bar Azimio, One Kenya Alliance, from demonstrating. But the court was clear that the law is clear, because the work of the court is not to make laws, but to interpret laws. So the court interpreted laws as per the Constitution of Kenya. And it didn't need any deep way of interpretation. Simple ways, the literal way of interpreting the Constitution, or the golden way, or the purposive approach, the intention. And it is simple. In Article 37, that we are allowed to demonstrate, to picket peacefully. And even the cases that they've been taking to court on unlawful assembly, they were declared unconstitutional because it is infringing on the rights of Kenyan citizens. So they will proceed by declaring our demonstrations unconstitutional, because in one way or the other, I don't know what they fear or what they are hiding, but to us, we will proceed with our demonstrations because the Constitution dictates so.
I want to bring Maliba in at this point. Maliba, you've heard a lot of things from him. I'd be happy for you to react to a few, but while you're doing that, I want you to also react to whether or not the police could have acted differently in the circumstances that they found themselves.
You know, the right to demonstrate or picket is largely a tool that is in the hands of the people to exercise sovereignty and to also raise their voice. So sovereignty here being the agency that people can actually do their own things, or rather they can exercise power, they can take control into their own hands. In the instance of our constitution, of course, the constitution begins by saying that all sovereign power belongs to the people, and the people can exercise it either directly or through delegated to elected leaders like Honorable Babu Wino. Now, I'll really address the challenge that is in allowing the right to protest or to demonstrate, because actually our constitution becomes shy to speak of protest and just uses the word picket and demonstrate for obvious reasons, because the term used by the opposition here as MIO, One Kenya Alliance, has been mass action. Mass action has actually been a very effective tool, of course, from Gandhi to Luther in the US. But then when you're defining mass action, it has got three major components to it: rallies, it has got sit-ins, and then it has got something we call protest. Now, the word protest in itself, when you're defining it, becomes a little bit of a problem. Babu is a lawyer here. He'll tell you that definitions are very important. So the word protest could be both peaceful or violent. At least that particular meaning cannot be disputed when it comes to defining the word protest. Now, the bigger term, the larger term mass action in and of itself might not 100% fall within the ambit of Article 37. But be that it may, then the challenge is, whereas the police do not have the power, they do not have even the mandate to declare demonstrations illegal or not. That power they do not have. The Constitution as an authority is much up there, and you cannot use an act of parliament, for example, to try and criminalize a Bill of Rights. So on that particular end, I think the police and the authorities are overreaching themselves. But then where do you mark between the right to protest or to demonstrate and then a place where then the rights of other people are being violated, for example? So the police are in catch, I don't know whether it's 50 or catch 20, something like that, because in one place we have got the police, or rather the people, going out to exercise their rights. And then the other bit, Babu and I know how demonstrations work, because we, as younger people then, we organized, did a few, and we know that sometimes you might not be in a place where you can control the people who come out. And the people are coming out with a little bit of anger. People are hungry and angry at the same time. So the police are unable actually to balance these two things. It's actually a fight between politicians.
But isn't it their job to know how to balance? I would think that is what they should know how to do.
It's their work, yes. But then they cannot be a very fair referee in this particular aspect, because you either are seen to side or not. It's impossible for the police to come out as fair, because whoever is actually agitating feels like the police are coming in to actually stop them. So technically, I think for the police, it's a little bit of a difficult assignment to pull through without either looking like they are anti-demonstration. But a little bit also, I have seen a little bit of exuberance where the IG comes out and declares that this particular demonstrations are illegal. That a little bit is stepping out of what he should be doing. But then on the other side, the opposition, including Honorable Babu here, knows too well that it is impossible to manage once the people have come out. But then again, that is how demonstrations work. They are supposed to act the administration to stop sitting pretty comfortable. They are supposed to ensure that the government feels uncomfortable to a level where it can listen to it. I think up to now, from yesterday, I think if there's anyone who's still sitting comfortable, they could come out and speak like they really don't care. But the truth is that they actually have been shaken. And I'm looking forward to a time where they will actually be able to speak to each other.
Very well. Gentlemen, we're running out of time here, and I hope that we can cover as much as possible in the next few minutes. Babu, we have spoken extensively about the attacks on the Kenyatta family and the Odinga gas cylinder company. I want you to tell us how the party is processing these attacks.
Number one, when the government is involved in hiring of goons, which is in the public knowledge that they hired the goons. Even before that, our party leader, His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga, announced that the government was planning, they had ill intentions of organizing goons to attack some leaders and also to attack property. The sole role of the police, as they swore, is to protect lives and property. And if the government is involved in organizing goons to attack property of other leaders, that is for the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and also Raila's Spectre, then I don't know where we are headed, because it is the work of the government to protect property and protect lives.
But Honorable, where is the proof? I know that your leader has mentioned, and prior to this happening, has said what you just said. But what's the proof?
Let me ask you. A day before our demonstrations, our party leader announced and made the public aware that the government was organizing goons to attack leaders and to attack property of certain leaders. There are leaders in the government, a majority leader. He made a statement in the public in his speech, quoting him, saying that they would attack property of other leaders. And they were specific, and they even mentioned the property that was to be attacked. Then on the day of demonstration, the said properties were attacked.
I see. So if you know this for sure, do you need? Well, we need hard proof other than what somebody has said in Parliament or to the news media. But here's my actual question.
That is sufficient evidence to justify the
circumstantial. It sounds circumstantial at best. No, it doesn't. I hope you can react to that. But what I want to ask now is, if you're so sure of this link between the attacks on the properties and the government, do we expect you to take any action?
Actually, what we'll do next, we are waiting for our party leader to give us direction, but we don't expect to attack them back, because an eye for an eye will make the whole world go blind. We are waiting for instructions from our party leader. But let me ask you, even in a court of law, if witnesses are coming out to say that this is what we are planning to do, and that happens, what more evidence do you need? The writing is on the wall.
Well, I hope it stands in court, but as I said, it sounds more circumstantial and evidence to me, and I wish you had given me something much more than that. But let's move on quickly so that we can cover as much as possible in the last few minutes that we have. There are those who have argued that while there is germane problems with the economy of Kenya, it would appear that the Azimio alliance will be taking advantage, or is taking advantage, of the economic condition for political expediency. Quick reaction to that.
Let me tell you something, my dear. The economy of a state is determined by the political activities of that state. or rather the political activities of a state determines the economic activities of that state. So the two can never be separated. It is the political activities that brings development in a nation. The two are like twins. Therefore, one of the problems that we have in Africa is not money, is poor leadership. Because we have resources in Africa, including Nigeria. But the main problem we have in Africa is poor leadership that leads to serious leakages within the system. And one of the main leakages is corruption and poor management. But you look at our nation, if I come back home, the main problem we have is with the elections. In that, every year we go for elections. Every electioneering cycle, we go for elections. The moment we go for presidential election, that is where counting stops. That is where we lose touch with counting. That is where we don't know how to count. Because leaders in Kenya, to be precise and accurate, presidents in Kenya are never elected, they are selected. So the problem starts from that. Therefore, the cost of living will automatically be high if there is poor leadership, because there's poor management. And when the cost of living is high, it is as a result of our electoral system. Because if we get poor leaders, how will we manage our resources? The little that we have cannot be sufficient for us because it's ending up into the pockets of a few.
Very well.
So in our country, there is no taking advantage of the cost of living.
Very well. Babu, I'm having to wrap up. And so here's my follow-up question to that.
This first. We have to fix certain challenges. One of them is the cost of living. The next one is electoral injustice.
I see.
So they must be fixed.
On the economic front, who is this helping? Because for the ordinary business people in Kenya, on Mondays and Thursdays, should this continue, they have no business to run, because then it would appear that the city is shut down because of the protest. So who is this helping economically?
But you see, the city is shut down because of the police, how the police is handling this. Honorable Maliba there, Arnold Maliba there, and myself, we are not trained police officers. Policemen are trained on how to handle protests. I'm very sure it is a unit that they take when they are training on how to handle groups and protests. We were doing rallies across this country. Business was going on as usual. We went to over 20 counties. Business was going on. We were campaigning in 2022. Business was going on. We are now demonstrating. Business should just go on because the work of the police is to control these crowds.
Indeed.
And these crowds, they are very peaceful.
Very well. I just want to give Maliba the last word on here. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And so you have the last word, Maliba. How can we make sure that this ends? What is the way forward?
I think Raila Odinga, being a seasoned politician, should actually find ways of restructuring the engagement so that then we are able to have some level of semblance, because violence begets violence, and therefore you realize that this game is zero-sum. Now that the opposition are going to the streets, and what we suspect government operatives are also then reaching out and also meeting violence on the opposition leaders and targeting them out, it means that this is going to be zero-sum. It's a zero-sum game. No one really gains out of it. And we will simply keep getting more violence out of it, because so-and-so has been attacked, then they will organize the other people to attack them. At the end of the day, you realize that this will not help even the citizen in whose name these particular wars are being fought. Because you already realize that we are losing the stock market, for example, the Nairobi Stock Exchange has been losing as much as 9 billion shillings per week. Kenyan shillings, the 9 billion Kenyan shillings per week. That's too much, and it's already affecting the economy. Kenya has been a good transit for goods that are going deeper into the larger part of East and Central Africa. Now, a number of our neighbors are reconsidering using Tanzania as a route and avoiding Kenya altogether. So
right.
it's hurting the economy. Once it hurts the economy, that very cost of living that we're talking about, actually it exacerbates the situation. So
absolutely,
there is need for restructuring this particular engagement. Demonstrations in and of themselves are not bad, but they are supposed to pass a message. If then we are going to push on at this rate, we might not even have a country at the end of the day. So,
gentlemen, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it here. I hope we can pick this conversation again subsequently. Thank you so much for your time here. Maliba Arnold is a public policy analyst, and Honorable Paul Babu Owino is Member of Parliament for Embakasi East in Kenya. We've been discussing the political situation in that country. Let's see what happens on Thursday if there's another protest. We'll pick up the conversation here on The Square. I am Kemini Amano. That'll be all from us today. Bye-bye.